For the first time since spring of 23, and amidst a lawsuit filed in the state of California, Swan CEO Cory Klippsten gets behind the mic to have an exclusive interview with me. What gives Swan Bitcoin its value? Are we in a war on information? Is Bitcoin apolitical? Does crypto hinder or help legitimate Bitcoin adoption? Let's discuss. I hope you enjoy the show.
You find those who have not had freedom and not in a position to define freedom, they're beginning to define it for themselves now. And as they get in a position intellectually to define freedom for themselves, they see that they don't have it. And it makes them less peaceful.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice.
Monetary debasement is out of control. Runaway debt like an animated snowball. The only question is, do you want to take the steps to get out of the way, or do you become a casualty to parasitic greed? Okay, we will, I'll put you through lights, camera, action on the backside. It's like 8 seconds. And then from there, everything will be, live. Okay, see you on the other side. Well, I finally got you on my show. Appreciate you spending some time with me, brother. How are you?
Yeah, man. Congratulations on the launch. Good to see you.
Yeah. No worries. And before we get into important things, I just want to say, this thing is still sitting in my office. For those who don't know, Pacific Bitcoin 2023, simple mining 3v3 champion. I was playing like a dog out there. It was hot, and I was not going to take a loss. Let's just say that. Will there ever be a chance where I get to defend this, or is this the one?
Listen, I don't want to be the only ever winner of the 3-point contest after winning in 22 and 23.
I knew you were going to say that.
Definitely trying to bring something back for 2025. Couldn't organize it on short notice during LA Bitcoin Week, but I'm hopeful that we'll get something up for next fall.
I want to talk to you about some things. Go back in time for a minute. You released a very thoughtful article. It was called "The Race to Avoid the War," November 22, around the time of the FTX collapse. So fast forward almost 2 years now, 2 years later, when considering all the things that have happened in the world to date, do you think we've actually avoided the war?
So no, we haven't avoided the war. It hasn't happened yet. And what we're trying to do is reduce the chances that it will happen. And so, for those that haven't read it before, first of all, I would. It's still, I think, as relevant today as ever, and it's kind of my overarching thesis on what's going on as sort of Bitcoin layer 1 interacts with layer 0, the social layer, across governments and people and markets and all of these other things that aren't in the protocol. And the war that I talked about and that I think about a lot is not something that would actually kill Bitcoin, because Bitcoin can't be killed. The network itself, obviously, we kind of have game theorized that 6 ways from Sunday over the years. But it's this idea that a coordinated effort could sort of make life really, really suck for a number of decades for Bitcoiners and participants in the Bitcoin ecosystem, that it would basically have to go dark. In the long run of the millennia, even that might not be the worst thing, because it would then grow like a sewer rat in the dark and be black market money and do all these crazy things. But for those of us alive today that would like to see, as has been said before, like if we can just stave off one instance of hyperinflation in one country in the world, then there's almost no lengths that I wouldn't go to make that happen. And so, when I think about that, and I think about the lives of all the people that have put their savings into Bitcoin at this point, and all the people whose lives can be improved in the near term, if we can just have a smoother glide path without actually fighting that war, that's the race to avoid the war. Let's, instead of fighting these people, let's co-opt them and help Bitcoin suck them in and align them with Bitcoin, the politicians, the State Department, governments around the world, right? Get them to align with Bitcoin. That would be a much preferable to fighting a war.
And I understand that, and I hear that, and that's a very good goal for all Bitcoiners to have, to be people that align people with this effort to make a better world for everyone. But I would say that in the past, there's been these ambiguous fiat wars on these ideas. People call them idea wars: war on terror, war on drugs, war for democracy. Do you think that right now there's a war on information?
There's certainly an information war. So there are warring participants trying to get their information out and trying to discredit other people's information. I think that's pretty obvious that that's going on all the time. And frankly, that it always has been. It's just much more out in the open now with the rise of social media and sort of the democratization of broadcast, because YouTube is broadcast and Rumble is broadcast and video on all these social networks is broadcast. It is one to many, right? And so the choke point that existed with the 3 national TV networks in the US and maybe 1 national TV network in lots of other countries doesn't exist anymore. And it angers politicians and people that are used to wielding power, that they don't have this this ally, this vetter of facts that can decide for the people how things are, and then tell them this one version of truth that we all share. And that's never going back in the bag.
And that ally is kind of still there. They try to work themselves out, but they seem to be a little less effective than they have been in the past. And that's because people have alternatives to get the information that they're looking for. And when we think about Bitcoin is, when it was discovered, people were trying to figure out what exactly it is. It's not just money. It's not just digital property. It's like all of these different, it's not just cryptographic powers, all these things combined together to form what we see as Bitcoin. And when we collectively and individually philosophize about Bitcoin, what it is, like in your eyes, do you see it as property? Do you see it as a weapon? Do you see it as speech?
So I definitely see it, I'd say, primarily as money. I do also see it, obviously, different regulators can call it property. Money is property as well. So it definitely fits under that umbrella. The code is speech, so it is that as well. I don't mind philosophical musings about trying to create analogies, but an analogy is not the same thing as saying something actually is. So I'd say, at best, the whole Bitcoin seems like a weapon analogy is just that. It's kind of an analogy. I don't think it actually is a weapon. I think it's not been something I've been interested in pursuing and even spending any time on, like Second Amendment protection for Bitcoin or something like that. Just seems kind of like a fanciful thing to discuss in a dorm room if you're a little bit too high. It's kind of a 19-year-old thing. Now, I think that it's awesome to still give people lots of different ways to think about Bitcoin and what it could be and what it could mean and everything. But I think just much more concretely, you're seeing the rise of the best monetary technology that we've ever had, and just the world waking up to that little by little.
Now, when you think about another narrative that Bitcoin has had, is that Bitcoin is apolitical. Now, I've seen, when I look at the comparison of Bitcoin as money, when I look at the comparison of Bitcoin compared to the dollar, the euro, whatever people use as the 3 use cases for money, they carry some political incentives, political characteristics with them. And then you think about Bitcoin, and people say Bitcoin is apolitical. I'm wondering, based on the ideas that if Bitcoin is information or Bitcoin is speech, speech is defended by some and attacked by others. Property, the same thing. Some people say you don't get to own any property. Property is only owned by the state and other people, or capital property. Other people say the opposite, the capitalists. So from your eyes, do you think that Bitcoin is actually apolitical, or is that one of those analogies that people can muse on and philosophize about, but isn't necessarily true?
So I think it is a technology in that way, and it is money, and in that respect, it is apolitical. It also is just it's not human, and politics is the realm of humans, right? Bitcoin is this network, and then little Bitcoin is the money on the network. So, I guess if you're talking about leaving that aside and just thinking like, does it seem like Bitcoin is being more adopted by one political philosophy versus another? I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that it aligns pretty well with Austrian economics, and that aligns, pretty well with free market capitalism, not crony capitalism, not oligarch capitalism. None of those are that different from communism, socialism, tyranny, some of the other things that we don't like to see out there. As far as like in the USA, I think that buyers and holders of Bitcoin, it seems like it's pretty diverse across the political spectrum, but that the liberals don't talk about it much, which is kind of funny. And that's just that. I think that's a feature of it. It does kind of give the lie to a lot of the, at least, economic philosophical underpinnings of modern day liberal policy. Not classical liberalism. It's actually pretty well aligned with classical liberalism, but kind of the way that the parties have shifted over time. It seems like there's more kind of free markets and more fiscal conservatism. I mean, I can't say either major party in the U.S. has anything to do with fiscal conservatism, but that does tend to align more on the right. And it is really hard to kind of carry a well fleshed out platform representative of the left in mainstream America and also have Bitcoin on it. It just has a lot of contradictions inherent in trying to pull that off. It's a lot of jujitsu. So that's what I kind of see is, like we at Swan have lots of clients from across the political spectrum, but they're probably on the left quieter about their affinity for Bitcoin in their circles.
No, well stated. So speaking of Swan, I do want to get into the company a little bit. Swan has grown immensely since the days of simple daily Bitcoin stacking. So if you were to identify all of Swan's business stacks, how would you define them?
Yeah, I mean, I think broadly what you're looking at is the growth of a new industry, which is the Bitcoin financial services industry. So it's recognizing that Silicon Valley fintechs, which are, that whole ecosystem is much more drawn to the shiny object of technology, which has kind of wrapped them into crypto, blockchain, ICO land for the last 6-7 years. And they've monetized that very well without actually delivering product market fit or value to the real world. And then on the Wall Street side, the model is so much about assets under management, which is kind of antithetical to what Bitcoin is and what Bitcoin does and can enable for us people, being able to be self-sovereign and take self-custody and not have it under management with something that's readily accessible by the government anytime they want. And so that creates, there's two sides of the coin here. One is it's kind of open field running for the companies that are building Bitcoin financial services, because we have these incredible tailwinds of the market behind us, Bitcoin adoption increasing, and frankly now with the Wall Street kind of on board with the ETFs, they're a beautiful top of funnel that get people into Bitcoin. And once somebody gets a little bit of Bitcoin and they read enough, then they prefer the real thing. And that becomes a great top of funnel for people that are selling real Bitcoin and doing real Bitcoin services instead of IOU paper Bitcoin. And so, what are the array of services that you think a major financial institution 10 years from now, 2035, let's say, a major financial institution that has Bitcoin at the core of it, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to obviously sell Bitcoin a bunch of different ways. They're going to have, savings plans. They're going to have spot brokerage. They're going to have high net worth private client services like we do. They're going to have retirement products. We've got, traditional IRA, Roth IRA. We just struck a partnership with Equity Trust, 50-year multi-billion-dollar company in the Midwest that's been doing this stuff forever. So we'll be able to add like 529 plans, SEP IRAs, 401ks. You are going to want to work with wealth managers that understand Bitcoin in a portfolio and have, more than a target of 0 for their clients in that portfolio. And some of those may start with ETFs, but they'll also graduate their clients toward having real Bitcoin, probably in collaborative custody, so that the customer can control it. But whatever the fee model is for the advisor that's helping them and putting this in their portfolio, they're still going to be aligned in that way and be able to make their money as well. And then there's a lot of other products like asset-backed loans, which is always a two-sided marketplace. So you're going to have the asset-backed loans non-rehypothecated, like the ones that have had no losses historically, whether it's Unchained or Silvergate, they never lost a dime. So you're basically just pledging your Bitcoin and taking out something like a 50% loan to value in cash if you need to, pay for college or buy a house or something like that, and you want to not sell your Bitcoin. And then there's another side of that, which is the credit fund that comes in. So somebody has to provide that capital, and that's something that a company like Swan can do as well, is actually raise the money that then gets lent out. That can come from our institutional clients or our private clients. You've also got things like credit cards and credit card receivables. So there's kind of all these different things, Bitcoin backed rewards cards. There's all these different things that you can do around Bitcoin that are better products and services if they're created and sold and then serviced by a company that actually understands Bitcoin, talks about Bitcoin every day, and actually understands how to do this. It's possible that there's no product more aligned with that than a collaborative custody product like Swan Vault. So this is, the customer gets 2 out of 3 keys, but they're happy that they can keep one in like the deepest of cold storage with geographic distribution. And so the Jade goes in the safety deposit box, in another town or something. They keep one close by, and then they can also sign with their Swan key and still spend their Bitcoin or move their Bitcoin as they like. And have the help with, inheritance, or if something happens to them, they've got a company to come and kind of help sort it out. Right. So I think that custody remains something that is probably the hardest problem to solve for people that get into Bitcoin. And I think having a company that kind of has that at its core as one of its key functions that it offers on the collaborative custody side, or just intense education and support for pure self-custody as well. Which we've always been, kind of a leading voice in that since we got into the business 5 years ago. I think it's super important.
Yeah, so I want to tug on a few tangents there, a few topics there. So you talk about, again, Swan has always been a proponent, like you say, of self-custody. But as we mature, as Bitcoin matures, all these different services pop up, and these services, in order to function, generally they're going to have some sort of partial or complete custody of the assets. And so when you think about, Swan says self-custody, but by my service, there's a slight disconnect. And of course, there's the multi-sig aspect. You already described one example with the 3. The customer holds 2 keys, we hold 1. In the future, forget Swan trying to figure out where they align from an ethical or what Bitcoin is standpoint. As we move into the future and these services become more mature, how many people do you think are actually custodying their Bitcoin? I remember one time you mentioned at least 80% of the people who are purchasing on Swan send it immediately as self-custody. You handle about 20% of the custody of the purchases. Does that ratio?
Let me correct that one.
Go ahead.
It's interesting, this supports the whole sort of thesis that I just gave about paper Bitcoin being top of funnel for real Bitcoin. It's actually 50-50. So about half of Swan customers take self-custody, but it's historically been 83% of the Bitcoin. So basically,
that's right. Gotcha.
The more you own, the more it's worth it to you to have that personal sovereignty and to take self-custody. I tweeted a poll like 2 weeks ago, and I was, I don't know what we'll end up calling this thing, but it's something like a personal sovereignty multiple or something. But basically the question was, how much more valuable is Bitcoin in self-custody to you than Bitcoin that's, in a Bitcoin ETF or with a third-party custodian? And I think I gave I think it was 1 to 1.5x, 1.5x to 5x, and more than 5x. And, obviously this is a Bitcoin audience of people on Twitter that follow me, but it came back, I think it was 64 or 65% said it was worth more than 5x Bitcoin that they didn't control the keys to. So the people really have a strong preference for, some subset of people that I think will get much larger over time has a very strong preference for very good reason for self-custody.
More than 5x. So they'll take a 60,000 Bitcoin in self-custody rather than a $300,000 Bitcoin on Coinbase.
That's what they're saying.
Well,
and the thing is, like, whether somebody would actually do that or not, it almost in some ways doesn't really matter that much, because the attitude is there, which means they're going to go self-custody.
Yeah.
Right. So
and then the question is, even if you have a,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I guess, it's weird. It's a weird question it's a weird disposition to be in, because even if you have a $300,000 Bitcoin on Coinbase, do you have access to that buying power? And like, whenever you want, like, how soon do you want access to it? Because if you're taking it off next week, doesn't matter. If you're taking it off in 5 years, I feel like there should be some sort of a time variable to that dynamic.
There is, and that how accessible it is to you when you want it is not nearly as important to me as how accessible it is to a government when the government wants it.
Yes, sir.
Right. And so, like, by definition, if you don't have a good self-custody setup and, haven't been able to think through with your family and estate lawyers or whatever, what the succession plan is, like, if you haven't done that, you almost by definition kind of need to stay pretty interested in politics. And you need to watch elections, and you need to be thinking about, what is the sequence? You have to have a theory of what the world would look like when you need to scramble to make sure you get your coins out. And it needs to be months, right? Because, something could idiosyncratically happen to just you and your account very easily, where you end up in, Coinbase support gulag, and it could take you 6 months to get your coins out while you're watching the march of tyranny because of some weird thing that happens in an election or whatever it is. So it creates this tremendous stress, I think, for people that really understand Bitcoin, and especially if they have a lot of their net worth into it. At some point it flips over, and the stress of self-custody and having to take that personal responsibility becomes a lot less than the stress that they're thinking about when they think about what could happen to their coins when it's not in their control.
There's another thing that you talked about, and this was kind of a segue to it as well. Watching the news play out as you have no access to your account. You're in customer support gulag. A lot of people with that had Celsius accounts were experiencing that, and the world was generally in a peaceful time. The only thing that happened was a market correction, and Celsius provide the option to take a loan out against your assets, and they had the ratio of 4-to-1, 25% loan to value. And now, you mentioned in passing some of the potential products. You talked about 50% loan to value. Now, I know we've progressed about 2.5, 3 years since Celsius and Bitcoin crypto has become more mature over time. But what does it take to get to a pretty nice ratio like 50% and even 100% loan to value? What does Bitcoin need to do to get to that potential ratio?
So, you wouldn't do 100% loan to value, because what you're talking about is like pledging collateral and then taking out dollars against it, basically, to be able to spend right now. And basically, when it's just Bitcoin and I apologize, I don't know the ins and outs of Celsius's retail lending platform circa early
No, it's
2022.
okay.
But you know, the way it works, if you do the 50% loan to value, and you are you know, basically you have margin calls readily available, you know, pretty much instantaneously, or at least, you know, maybe every 12 hours or once a day or something like that. And it's something that can be sold into deep liquid global markets like Bitcoin that trade 24/7. It is an incredibly low risk operation, basically, versus some of these other things. Now that's low risk that's not low risk for the customer. The customer doesn't want it to be instantly margin callable unilaterally by the provider of the loan, right? The customer wants 3 days to be able to provide capital to top that up and not get margin called in the event of a crash, right? So that's kind of the balance that you see. If you're lending to institutions that have tons of assets and they've posted, you know, X amount of Bitcoin and they've taken out 0.5X in dollars because of it, but they're a credible institution that has assets 100 times more than the Bitcoin that they've posted or something like that, you're going to have terms where you give them a grace period where they're able to top it up, right? You know, you've seen this in the Celsius filing for their bankruptcy estate, the August 9th filing that they had. You know, like they were supposed to have a certain period of time before they paid back the asset-backed loans that they took out from an institutional lender. And, you know, basically their claim is that the terms weren't adhered to, and they weren't given the window of time to provide the assets, basically. And so they got margin called in that window. So, you know, these things are negotiable, but, you know, I do think that is, you know, as Saylor and others have said, like, this is the most pristine asset. I think a credible operation that does asset-backed loans should be able to price really tight. You know, 10 years from now, I think there will be a ton of capital provided for this, and that market will be at something like SOFR plus 50 bips or SOFR plus 1%, whereas today it's more like SOFR plus 8, something like that. So it's just dramatically mispriced, and I think more people will pile into that market. And you know, the current provider's margin is our opportunity.
No, I appreciate that. Let's go back to Swan for a minute. So what gives Swan its value, potentially investors? What maybe I could rephrase that. What is Swan's greatest asset from your perspective as CEO?
Yeah, I mean, let's start just kind of with like tech. What is probably the most important, the hardest problem to solve in this space of providing a bearer asset in exchange for an asset dollars that's reversible in the banking system in the US. So in Canada, you have push bank transfers. In Europe, you have push bank transfers. In the largest, deepest market in the world, the USA, we have ACH transfers, which is a pull, which means that fraudsters can pretend to make a bunch of purchases or make those purchases and then basically try to reverse them. And so that's what you see in the USA all the time is, you know, a lot of people get into Bitcoin or crypto and they try to start a brokerage of some kind, and they basically just get defrauded out of existence, or they raise a big venture round and then essentially give it all to fraudsters. This is not dissimilar from what PayPal went through in the early days. So kind of the legend of Max Levchin and his team being able to figure out how to conquer the Russian fraudsters that were stealing $10 million a week or something from PayPal as they were trying to grow and trying to raise money and all of that. You know, it was this sort of battle room where they figured out how to beat those guys and figure out the heuristics and figure out that risk scoring of who to accept as a customer and who not to. So, you know, similarly, you know, Jan Pritzker, another Ukrainian Jewish immigrant, also from Kiev, Max Levchin 2.0, you know, he and the team have, I think, delivered, from what we understand, to be the best risk engine in the business of Bitcoin and crypto. We have the lowest loss ratios of anybody. And I think that is what gives you the confidence to go out and know that if you're bringing in customers, that you're not just giving away the store. You know, and it makes us a little bit tighter. We're probably a little bit more conservative than a Coinbase, which has tons and tons of money and can kind of eat the losses. But I think that is what you kind of run into. To be able to build an engineering team, to be able to piece together the software packages and the risk packages and all the different services and data sets and all of that, and put it together in a way that is keeping up with the rise of AI among fraudsters. And they're submitting, fake videos, right, as they're trying to like get through account signups and things like that. Like all these different things that are hitting us. There was some advantage to starting a crypto exchange like 10 years ago and making a bunch of profit before the fraudsters got more sophisticated. So if you're starting like a Bitcoin on-ramp today, your opponents that are going to try to steal from you in a place where the transactions are reversible, like the USA, have already been trained up by trying to defraud Coinbase since 2012 and Kraken since 2012 and Binance US and Swan and River and Unchained. Like they've been trying to defraud these people all
It's
along.
it's no longer a small pond. Like
It's
it is
not
a
at
big
all.
pond.
And so that's why I say, like, you need to know that your fixed cost of building that function inside your company, and also the hard cost, the dollars that are going to have to be spent, you're going to have to reach such a huge scale to be able to actually serve retail. It is an extremely expensive proposition. I would say, like, today, if you wanted to say, okay, I'm going to have a credible plan for onboarding a few 100,000 customers in the next few years, I think you need to plan to raise at least $100 million to be able to do that. Like, you just won't be able to take ACH and onboard retail with an app without that. And you're going to have absolute superstar genius engineers and security people and credible people that have been chief information security officers at big 7 tech companies. Like what you have to have on your side to be able to do that is very substantial, which means that your scale to be able to eat that cost and to have the rest of your business actually be able to pay for that fixed cost of security and fraud and risk, you need to know you're going to have to hit essentially pretty large scale to be able to pay for that. And so I think that, essentially you've seen the rise of a lot of groups that are kind of doing the, almost kind of like glorified consulting thing, where you're kind of advising high net worth individuals, and you're kind of a group of guys and, 3 people, 6 people, whatever. They all kind of look like, it'd be like if you carved out just Swan Private and made that a standalone company. And like, that's cool and that's interesting. And like, God bless all the onboarding that's going on there, and you can make a nice little living, but it doesn't scale. Like that alone, without the retail offering and meeting people where they are and providing the education and having an app and letting them pay with a bank transfer, you're not really doing that much. You're not able to make much of a dent without taking on the hardest problem in Bitcoin, which is in the US anyway, which is letting people spend shitty reversible currency for the best money ever. That's a bearer asset that can just disappear in their clutches once the fraudsters get a hold of it. So I think that's probably the core technology and sort of, secret sauce of Swan is what we've been able to do on that. And then I'd say, for anybody just kind of looking out from the outside, I would say probably just the strength of the brand and the team and kind of the trust that we've been able to achieve in the market just through working and engaging and helping and just kind of being there, providing the educational content over the years.
Now, speaking of engaging and providing educational content over the years, you have gotten behind the camera a few times recently, and you look damn good putting out shorts and stuff like that, and going back to the fundamentals of why Bitcoin in a succinct way. You're putting out shorts. How do you enjoy that? It's like, and how I remember there was a time when you kind of wanted to phase yourself out, and you're putting yourself back in front of the camera. What is that like for you? What's the reasoning for that? And of course, how do you enjoy doing those shorts? Is it grueling? Is it fun? Talk to me about it.
Well, shorts are pretty easy because you basically are just kind of riffing essentially off the top of your head on a topic. And so I think those are actually just fun, and they, come in under 60 seconds, and, basically just have a little crew. It's like me and P and Hurley, and they're just kind of tossing out topics, and Tomer as well. So it's kind of the 4 of us will just sit around for an hour once a week and just toss around ideas for things that I can say. And then I just kind of riff on them. And that's how those are constructed. I guess more broadly, like just being back in the media again after mostly taking time off since probably like spring of 2023. So I go to Turkey in the summer. So I went to Turkey in the summer of 23. Then I came back, and I was so busy building the mining business and building Swan Institutional and kind of all the other things that we were working on. And then also we had so many good people at Swan, like Stephen Lubka and John Haar and Terrence and people that we wanted to get out there. So I basically just put our two PR firms focused on pitching everybody other than me. And I would take kind of inbound here and there. But for the most part, I tried to just stay out of the media for a whole year. I felt like I had done so much in 21 and in particular in 22 with the crypto collapses and kind of being front and center with Luna and Celsius and FTX collapses. I just got kind of burned out. I was spending, so much of my time just doing work for other people, meaning these media companies, and giving them interviews. And I just wanted to focus more on Swan, but now I think, coming back, I've been off for a little while. I've got a lot to say. I also think that it's important to be out there and be a strong voice heading into a bull market and making sure that there's kind of, and it's not just me. I think a lot of people need to kind of dust it off and do more appearances. And, some of the OGs that have taken 4 years off, may want to get back out there and, just, you got to repeat the same messages, play the greatest hits, Bitcoin, not crypto, and why, and, how to think about accumulating Bitcoin, and should you buy it all right now? Should you DCA? Like helping people just kind of understand all the things that we think are maybe tired and old messages, but are going to be brand new. And, the way these algorithms work on the social networks, like 99% of the video views happen on new shit, not old shit. And so these people are not going to see anything that you saw, 4 years ago or 2 years ago. You've got to say it again. And so, this was actually, I think, my opening speech for Pacific Bitcoin 2023, if I recall. It was basically like,
yes, it was. Mm-hmm.
If you've got a big audience and that a lot of new people are about to pile into the space or are kind of coming into the space, it is kind of incumbent upon you to tell them everything about Bitcoin yet again, and hopefully you can come up with new ways that make it fun for you to do it, whether it's new formats. And I'm experimenting with, a new show format potentially that we might do. But, that's why we've got Cafe Bitcoin and we've got Hurley's videos on the YouTube, and we're doing my shorties, and, maybe Brady dusts off and does Citizen Bitcoin again, we'll see. But, I'm pretty happy with the state of Bitcoin educational content and educational media. I'd say it's probably tilting a little bit toward too much kind of noob sensationalism and price hopium than what I'd prefer. But, I think that's just kind of a sign of the times as well. Like that's just, it just means that there are a lot of voices out there, and there can be a diversity of these groups, and you can be super successful as, a Swan or a BTC Sessions or a Pleb Underground, just kind of doing what you do. And it's okay if there are people out there pumping price models and Bitcoin trading and things like that. We just need to, provide a little bit of a counterbalance and make sure that people stay grounded and stay humble as they approach this.
Well, I do thank you for lending your voice to this platform as well. And it's nice to have you back. So going back, the OGs, going back in time, we have, if you go back in time for yourself, going back in time for myself, there was a time when we sniffed around altcoins. What triggered the change for you to become Bitcoin only? And when actually did that happen? If you can break down like you're coming to this awareness moment.
Yeah. So let's see, I've told this before, but obviously people, if you're watching this, probably haven't seen those, and it's going to be hard to find them because they're buried by the algos. So I had a couple of swings and misses first. Somebody gave me Bitcoin at a tech conference in like January of 14. It was on a blockchain.info wallet, probably. Lost the key, don't have it. I think it was like 1/8 of a coin or 1/4 of a coin or something. So that's gone. And then in like December of 2015, I was helping a buddy put together like a presentation to sell off some of his early angel stakes, which included a couple of early Bitcoin-ish startups. Didn't take. I put together the damn deck and had to do a little research. It was like just was focused on other things, didn't take. It wasn't until the big price run up in spring of 2017, and I was 2 feet into Silicon Valley doing the advisor investor thing for Silicon Valley startups, and a bunch of people in my professional network started jumping out and getting involved in crypto, because this is Silicon Valley, right? So the Bitcoin signal didn't come through very strong at first. I will give credit to the guys at Distributed Global, so Tucker and Johnny, who were doing, Asian ICOs or whatever, but they knew me by reputation around town and knew some of my friends. And at least Tucker was like, listen, at least start with Bitcoin, read this book. So, made me read Digital Gold in that summer. It still didn't quite take. I was really confused by all the signals coming out of Union Square Ventures and Andreessen Horowitz and all these, everybody wanted a friction token in their marketplace and things like that. So I had basically listened to blockchain podcasts and crypto podcasts all that summer and fall. Just really didn't, maybe it's partially being in Los Angeles or just on the West Coast. I don't know that there was a place that would have been a good place to get pure Bitcoin signal. Maybe New Hampshire or Austin or something. Like if you ran into Pierre and Bitstein in Austin, maybe you'd have some chance of skipping crypto and, Jimmy or something. In my case, I was just thinking Bitcoin was one of these cryptos all the rest of 2017. The first moment that I remember really questioning that was meeting Jimmy Song at BlockCon in Santa Monica. I believe it was like right at the end of October. It was like the day before Halloween or something of 2017. And that got me started like reading and researching a little bit more. And I kind of watched the rise, but I owned a bunch of shit coins and I owned a little bit of Bitcoin, but I didn't have conviction in anything. So I was just kind of playing around at the edges. I started consulting to post ICO companies in like November. So I think I worked for Block V first, which was kind of the first big NFT platform. Interestingly, it was started by the guys who started Tether back in the early days. So they'd sold Tether off. And so this was like Reeve Collins and Eric Poulier and Craig Sellers. And these guys were doing, I don't know. It was basically ad tech that didn't need a token in the end. I figured that out a few months later that it didn't need a token, but by then I'd spent 2 months on it. So it wasn't until like March or April of 2018 that I think it really clicked for me. And I think it was just a result. I probably watched, every Andreas Antonopoulos video and, over the holidays and into January and February. And I was also evaluating the other side, like what is this non-Bitcoin crypto thing, and like meeting all the people. I'm here in LA, I have easy access to San Francisco, and I had 2 feet in, and I just didn't see that there was anything. It didn't seem that anything of lasting value was definitely being created. I wasn't nearly as on point as I have been for the last 4 years, and just kind of articulating exactly why. It was more of just kind of an economic / rational decision that I thought that Bitcoin was. Yeah, I remember it. At some point in that kind of late Q1, early Q2 of 2018, I came to what I felt was a realization that Bitcoin was going to be at least 100 times more important than all the rest put combined. And so I didn't actually even at that point understand them all to be, what I probably would say they are now. But I knew that I only wanted to focus on Bitcoin. And so I basically, from that point, just tried to extricate myself from crypto activity. And I worked on a Bitcoin ecosystem fund that summer. That was with like Steve Lee and Dan Held and some other people trying to get like a Bitcoin ecosystem fund. And this was summer of 2018 is when I was already trying to do that. And by August 1st, I think I was completely clear of anything crypto related and was just trying to figure out what to do in Bitcoin. And I went back to doing the advising and angel investing thing and normie startups while I figured it out. Picked up a couple of Bitcoin clients, helped with Unchained for about 6 months as I was kind of ramping up Give Bitcoin in late 2019 and into early 2020. And then, by the time Swan launched in March, I think it was March 30th of 2020 that we finally launched swan.com or swanbitcoin.com back then, by that time I had also given up all of my normie, SaaS company and marketplace, advisory clients and advisory work, and was just full-time Bitcoin.
Awesome story. That's
Yeah.
It's crazy. I would say
I was just going to say, like, a lot of, you want to, if you start a company, you want to know that there's at least one person that you're solving a problem for. And ideally it's the founder that you're solving the problem for, because then you at least know that there's somebody out there that would buy it. And for me, the education focus and having the education come along with the gift of Bitcoin for the first product, and then being super education focused with everything we've done at Swan ever since. In a lot of ways, for me, I was just trying to shorten what for me was, 11 months being confused by crypto, and just trying to shorten that for other people, and seeing if we could get people to skip it completely or make it a 10-week consideration instead of 11 months. And some people, it takes many, many years, right? Like my journey, or my shitcoin horseshoe, as they say, was actually rather short compared to how it is for a lot of people. But, why not try to optimize that and make it shorter for everybody?
I never really heard your story. And it's so funny. I've always, when people ask me my story, I always say, I became a Bitcoiner in early 2020, around the same time that you started your company, around the same almost like the same week that Michael Saylor decided he was a Bitcoiner. But also around the same time that you're talking about, when you said like you got into crypto, or you kind of were teetering on the crypto Bitcoin fence. That was around the same time that I actually discovered crypto as well. But the difference between me and you is that once the crash kind of happened, I just kind of just up and forgot about it. So I kind of wish I had this network of people that was saying, no, this is why you need to learn about it. I knew a guy that had Bitcoin, but he was the quietest person I've ever knew, and he never talked about it. So it's like, gosh, like that one guy, I just wish that he would pull me aside and tell me why he had it in the first place. But
yeah,
go figure. Live and learn.
We're all still early, man.
Oh, for sure. And so we're talking about these tokens that you've been exposed to, and we talk about bull markets. Bull markets bring interesting dynamics. They bring the ICOs of 17. They bring the NFTs of 2020, 2021. Right now, it seems like there's this movement of tokenization of real world assets. And what we're talking about is that an example is Scottie Pippen for the Chicago Bulls. And I've seen a lot of Bitcoiners get excited. He's a celebrity, and he says he has a dream that he talked to Satoshi. But when you look at his tweet, it has nothing to do with anything Bitcoin related, but his $ ball, where he would essentially tokenize a basketball that he kept from a 1991 NBA Finals game. And so it's like the idea that he can have custody of it, but you can have a share of its value. And trust me, bro, you'll get it one day. It's like, and forget the basketball. We talk about tokenization of real estate. We talk about tokenization of food and what does it call it? Crops. And I think the only thing that has been tokenized essentially in real life, and you can say whether it's real or not, is essentially the dollar. And we talk about the dollar when it comes to Tether. Tether has tokenized the dollar, but money is a social construct. It's not actually real world. It's not actually a real world asset. It's what we think about in how we exchange value, and we use that as a substitute for bartering. So my question is to you, essentially what's going on? Is this the rug pull of this upcoming bull run that we're going to experience?
No, look, I think from what I understand, the meme from, tokenize everything, tokenize the world, that was kind of like a 2017, 2018 blockchain meme. Because remember, there was a big blockchain push in the bear market between 2013 and 2017. And then there was much more of a crypto push post 2017. And I think the one thing that survived from all the blockchain marketing pre 2017 was, let's tokenize everything and make it all tradable. And, basically like literally everything will be like an IKEA ad, and it all goes on an exchange, and you can exchange all this stuff. And I think it's 99% bullshit. I don't think that we want to actually have like free floating prices for everything all the time. I think that's kind of silly. Like you just don't need everything to be commoditized and traded and be liquid. It's just kind of, less financialization is probably a better goal for humanity than more, because it's not productive, right? So I think where there's risk that needs to be offset, like farmers that put in all the work and, they want to hedge off and sell some of their crop just in case, a storm comes and wipes it out or something like that. Like that's obvious. And I think there are use cases like that. Not everything needs to be tokenized. And the other thing is like nothing about real world assets having a token and being tradable has anything to do with decentralization, permissionlessness. Like it's all just orthogonal. It has nothing to do with it, because by definition, if there's a real world asset, then ownership of that will be adjudicated in meat space. This is not something that can live online, live on chain, so that basically is all just marketing BS. So yeah, it's kind of funny that the last two things that crypto blockchain can hang its hat on now appear to be, outside of the sort of self-referential kind of just trading and making money by trading these things. It's basically like meme coins, and now real world assets is back again, and there's nothing new under the sun. So there's the kind of negative sum game of just trading crypto that has no real world product use or value and is never going to outcompete Bitcoin as money. And there's meme coins, which is basically just, Coinbase ads are in the same places as FanDuel, Vegas, and DraftKings, and they look the same. Notifications on your Coinbase app, if you have it, or you see screenshots of it on Twitter like I do, they look the same as what you see from FanDuel and DraftKings. Like it's the same thing. It's just crypto is for gambling. Bitcoin is for saving. Bitcoin is for investing, and we'll be around for the long haul. And, I think we might get to the point where essentially any crypto.com ad or Coinbase ad or, whatever is going to require, basically like a Gambler's Anonymous message at the end of every ad. Because that's, I think, all that's left is crypto is for gambling. So anyway, we'll see how this rolls out. Maybe there's some other meme they can latch onto, maybe AI coins catches a heater or something like that, or just like the momentum of these things, like historically having been, some of them being high beta means that some of them will be high beta in a bull market again. Inevitably, some shitcoin with a small market cap will go up more in percentage terms than Bitcoin. But, the fallacy is always thinking that you're going to choose the right one, and that you will put as much money onto that right choice, which would be insane, as you can just putting it into Bitcoin. So when you talk about like, what is the capacity that the asset has to be able to like take your bet, that's crucial. And this is what traders and portfolio allocators in Wall Street and Chicago, like this is what they actually think about, is like how much size is there in the trade? Well, this strategy can only handle up to X amount of dollars, for instance. Otherwise, it just blows out your risk models, and you're basically kind of stupid to, if you had 100K to invest, you'd be stupid to put it all into this meme coin, because you might pick, one of the 95% of meme coins that doesn't pump. So you go on Twitter, probably more on TikTok, and brag about your gains, but we know you only put 1% of your tradable assets onto that meme coin, and then you like lost all the rest. Whereas you don't have to be a trader, and you don't have to be a guesser, and you don't have to be like a Telegram group insider just to buy and hold Bitcoin. So basically Bitcoin is for serious adults, or people that aspire to be serious adults. And crypto is, at best for fun, and mostly is just for gambling addicts.
It's so funny. And, you always think about, the SEC, for instance, when the SEC was calling, cryptocurrencies, equities, and that they should be, tracked by the government. And some Bitcoiners were saying to the SEC, yeah, send them to jail. And, the thought is, I'm focusing on this adoption to hyper Bitcoinization, adoption of store of value, medium of exchange, unit of account S curve. And, are those people, if crypto wasn't around, and it was just Bitcoin only, would adoption be more hurried, or would Bitcoin be treated even more so like a gamble, just like Shiba Inu? What are your thoughts on these things, whether it's tokenization of real world assets or the gambling coins? Do they actually slow Bitcoin adoption, or are the people that are intended to adopt Bitcoin going to do that anyways? And gamblers will be gamblers until they get tired of it. And if there wasn't a crypto, they would just go bet on sports games. What are your thoughts on that?
So, look, we don't have access to a multiverse where we can see what happened in different scenarios. And so you're basically making your best personal judgment based on the factors. So I believe that the $100 billion that went into marketing non-Bitcoin cryptos since 2017 siphoned off an absolute shit ton of demand from Bitcoin, and that the price of Bitcoin would be significantly higher today if it wasn't for, Andreessen Horowitz and all these guys pumping all the altcoins. Now, it also is true that it's inevitable that once you created Bitcoin, that there would be altcoins. There's just zero chance that engineers that got a hold of Bitcoin and saw it, there's zero chance that people wouldn't try to create imitators. So in that respect, it was inevitable, but the way that it played out and the choices that individual humans made along the way to do this thing or to do that thing, like Brian Armstrong deciding to go hardcore crypto exchange versus hardcore Bitcoin financial services, they have dramatic effects on what happens, right? So if Elon doesn't buy Twitter, that not only has dramatic effects on what Twitter is like, but also you probably don't see Zuckerberg becoming like a base bro libertarian who's now aligning, Facebook in a very different way, right? It's the external pressure created by Elon buying Twitter and calling him out and wanting to go beat him up at his house and stuff like this that made Zuck kind of nut up and go a different route, right? So these things actually have big time consequences. And so if in the wake of the collapses of the ICOs in 2018, if more large players had stepped up and done things a different way, which is what I and lots of people with much bigger voices and sort of more weight to their voices from more experience and more intelligence were saying back in 2018, like a lot of those people could have gone more Bitcoin, and instead they kind of just doubled and tripled down on shitcoin scams. And I wish it were different. I'm also very thankful that so many Bitcoiners, found their voice and started to provide a counterweight on social media and in the media, basically starting at that time in 2018, 19, 20, and just kind of ramping up. And they were enough to get people like Lynn Alden and Saylor into the space in 2020 to then just kind of carry it forward, right? And so, could it be worse? Yeah, it could be a lot worse. Could it be better? Yeah, it could be a lot better. Absolutely, it could be a lot better. And that's just kind of where we are. I don't know if we're somewhere in like the 70th percentile outcome of what could have been, or if we're in like, the 10 percentile outcome and, 90 out of 100 times Bitcoin price would be higher and there'd be more adoption. Like, it's impossible to know. But to say that, crypto is for sure good for Bitcoin is, I think, provably false. To say that there's nothing that ever came out of crypto that's good for Bitcoin is also false, because there have been things that have been adopted in Bitcoin code that came out of fucking shitcoin engineer research, and I think it's broadly net negative, but it doesn't mean that the ledger doesn't have anything in the pro column. It might have something in the pro column and a huge con column. But let's take at least the good stuff over, including those people that experimented with crypto early on and maybe got wrecked and then become awesome Bitcoiners. Like, welcome them.
I appreciate your candidness. I appreciate your time, and I definitely do appreciate your voice. You're far too humble. Thank you for coming on my show today and kind of breaking out of your 1 year plus hiding. And it's a pleasure to hang out with you always. And I'll be sure to see you at LA Bitcoin Week.
Yep.
Cory Klippsten, man, thank you so much.
Yeah, get your tickets to LA Bitcoin Day, October 17th. It's on labitcoinweek.com. Awesome.
Appreciate it. So that was Cory Klippsten, Swan CEO. It's an honor and privilege to have him on the show, Eyes of Liberty. I am Sir Ulric, like my father before me. Tune in next time when I have another brilliant Bitcoin guest.